directly the flex player in Call of Duty is just the guy in the map that is either going to be running an SMG or an AR, depending on what the team needs to get done. That is the simplest version, the man who likes to run both weapons.
An absolute tear. The lead is massive. Whoa, Apps on a streak. How about Silly? It's getting silly inside of the hardpoint. He is 9-1.
Hi, I'm Preston Priestahh Griner.
Hi, my name is Pierce.
My name is Justin Fargo Palmer, aka Silly, and I am the flex player for Los Angeles Guerrillas.
I think people think I'm a good flex player just over the past couple of years, especially in Black Ops 4, I would say. I was running an AR at the beginning of the game, and then when we were qualifying for the league, I ended up pulling out a submachine gun in the middle of the tournament. We switched roles, and I started frying with it. I just kept doing good. And also, people have just seen me run submachine guns in certain games, and I run an AR at the end of the game. So people have seen me throughout the years just run whatever gun that needs to be ran, to be honest.
So the flex player on the team is very important because certain maps in mode require different gun usage. Like there's some maps that require 2 SMGs and 2 ARs, some maps require 1 AR, 3 SMGs, so the flex player is typically the player who's going to switch back and forth. Typically requires a little more strategic understanding from that player and really, I guess, situational awareness because of the fact that playing as an AR in a certain map and mode is very different than playing as an SMG player in a different map and mode. So if you don't have a good flex, that means that on certain maps and modes that do require having more SMG or more AR play, if your player isn't really strong suited to do those things, then that means you're probably going to be automatically weaker at certain maps and modes because of that.
The flex role has definitely changed from 5v5 to 4v4. It's extremely different just altogether. Like roles change, the pace of the game changes, viewing the game is different, obviously a lot less chaotic, and I feel like the traditional roles come back a lot more. Because in 5v5, you know, if you just all fly to the same spot, it usually works, so it doesn't really matter what gun you have.
I think the stock of a flex player has gone through the roof now that we play 4v4. In 5v5, yeah, it was kind of cool to have someone who could mix things up, but where kills weren't as essential or as influential on the map, having 4v4 now and having a good flex player that can make the right decision based on where you and the team are on the map, that is crucial.
Most of the good professionals have a good understanding of how to play both, but the really good ones who are just like exceedingly better at it definitely create an advantage for their team.
This is problematic, certainly for Guerrillas early, unless Silly can be the difference maker. Nice movement there. It was all on Silly, and he was the lone man back there.
Whenever I'm constructing a team from the ground up, they're typically some of the players I'm looking at first.
I got good with both weapons, both sub and AR throughout the years, just by kind of like, even when I was playing like AIDS or just like pubs or anything, I wouldn't just run one gun. I wouldn't just run a submachine gun and just never pub AR. I was always that person I was like going in the games and just kind of using whatever I felt like at the moment. Especially in AIDS, like there was times when we wouldn't have AR players in the lobby and I'll just be like, all right, I'd run one. I just kind of liked just being able to like see the positioning that ARs go compared to subs and just how to kind of counter them in like my own eyes and just seeing how they work.
Even if they're not the top guy at whatever gun they would like to use, if you can fit any team, well, you can now be adjustable for a meta. If a gun gets nerfed or when the game changes after a year, this is gonna be the type of player you look at first that you know you can pick up and have that safety net. If the weapon meta turns out to be a 3 SMG meta, your flex player can fit that role. If it randomly turns into a 3 AR meta, your flex player can fill that role.
Some other factors that can influence like the flex role, especially early on in Call of Duty, people don't like necessarily have the meta figured out completely. So you also could be switching to a sub to match a pace with another team. You could be switching to an AR to match pace with another team.
Some players find themselves on teams where they have the freedom to do whatever they want. Some players will find themselves on teams where it's a bit more rigid and structured and you gotta run the SMG all the time.
Some teams would favor 3 subs on certain maps, some would favor 2 ARs, 3 ARs. It kind of just depends on like a team-to-team basis, but for the most part, it comes down to what map and mode you're playing. For example, on Garrison Control or Garrison Hardpoint, being a flex player, I'd want to run an AR full-time solely for the fact of getting cuts. There's a lot of long angles to watch, and you want to make sure there's at least 2 of you watching over your sub players. So you don't have 3 sub players because you're going to be giving up a full lane on that map. Well, on Raid Hardpoint, P2 and P3 hill on Raid are better suited for subs just because of the close range gunfights. Those hills get really mixy and there's a lot of sliding and trading going on at all times, and it's not the ideal scenario for an AR. Another plus of switching to a submachine gun on certain hills on certain maps is being able to run flak and tac, so you're not getting stunned or naded when you're in the mix of things, because most people traditionally run a 7 attachment AR.
So the trust as a flex player to me comes mostly from search and destroy. A lot of the games, I would say maybe this year a little differently, but I'd say most of the games have typically had a good balance between SMG and ARs. and it hasn't switched them up from map to map. I mean, it has at times. Well, like the one mode you will see players balantly just like switch weaponry all the time. Like there are some maps where you'll see 4 ARs on Search and Destroy because they have a strategy that requires 4 ARs, or vice versa. There's a strategy that requires 4 SMGs based on how aggressive they're playing it and how they want to hold the bomb site after they push it. So Search and Destroy typically is where you'll see kind of a lot of the flex players kind of come to life because they use the different weapons on those maps and modes, or excuse me, that mode specifically, and the different maps based on the strategy they're going to accomplish. So that's where you really get the most reps to really figure out if you're a strong player on both guns, because that's really when it tells you if you're able to do it or not.
Honestly, I usually practice it before I would actually do it. I'd go in scrims and practice putting on a sub on certain hills, see if it works. If it works, then in the moment in a tournament, I'll do the same thing. But there will be times like where I just randomly pull out a sub, and that just kind of comes from like if the game is kind of very like if it's coming close towards the end of a game, say if it's like 225 to 225, and I'm getting a deep spawn, I want a submachine gun to be able to like run fast to get to the hill. Because if I have an AR, it's gonna take me a couple more seconds to get there. So certain situations like that, I'll just randomly pull it out. Or even if like we have spawns for a hill, and I say I just recently had a submachine gun out. If we have spawns for a next hill, and I know I'm gonna spawn on the back of a hill, I'll pull out an AR just to make sure I can hold that spawn down and make sure we hold that entire hill.
It's basically just like when you're going into a game playing against a team, it's basically just breaking down their actual thought process and the way that they actually play the game. After a certain while, you can kind of pick up on what they're thinking about and what they're actually doing on the map, so you can kind of adjust it into your playstyle to try to kind of counter that.
So if you're a FaZe player, one big thing that has to be a part of you is that communication. You need to know when you want to switch to that submachine gun or that second assault rifle, but it all comes with communication. You got to see the intensity on the map. Your subs obviously are going to be letting you know what's going on since they are the aggressors, but as the flex, it's all going to come down to communication. What's going to happen? If you're going to pull out an assault rifle, how does it go up against the opposite team if they're running 3 or if they're running 3 submachine guns? It all depends on the situation. You just have to make sure you're communicating with your team, because if you switch to that wrong role, it can definitely cost you.
I think it's more important to talk about switching guns on a rotation, just because it's not me just spawning them back and holding spawns. It's more of, yo, I'm putting on a submachine gun for this rotation, so then they're going to kind of know like how I'm going to play the rotation. I'm not going to play it like a super AR position, a super like God had glitch or whatever. I'm not going to be playing slow. Like I want to run with them. I'm trying to break with them, so it's going to be, they're just going to have to know that's going to be faster pace rather than like when I just hold a spawn. So that's way more important in my eyes to tell them that I'm switching.
I honestly feel like there's not a ton of natural flex players. I've pretty much ran every single gun over the years. I've been a main sub, I've been a second sub, I've been main AR before, second AR flex. Especially coming up, like if you're not already like a pro or anything like that, I feel like using different weapons on different teams gives you the absolute best value as a player if people can see in history that you've used different guns. So like when you say, oh, I can run this, I can run that, people don't doubt what you say because they've seen actual, you know, VOD or actual like experience where you've ran that specific gun. The downside and the challenges of being a flex player is obviously like, you know, like having to run a specific gun depending on the map, but there is upsides to it as well. Flex players usually get the best weapon for the, you know, the best map. So like a submachine gun is obviously good on the smaller maps and things like that. So there is a bit of an advantage, but having to be good with every single gun is obviously a bit of a challenge because, you know, there's a lot of like one-dimensional players that are really slow and they play slow with an AR, and then there's crack subs that slide cancel around and fly everywhere. And if you're a flex player, you kind of have to be in like a happy medium where you can do both those things at all times.
When I think of the flex player, I think of the guys who have to do it all. They have to be in every situation and they have to hold the team together. So we think of that submachine gun entry player, that's the bun of the burger. It's the first thing you come across. When you think of the main AR, that's the patty in the middle. It's very meaty and it's strong and it's got an important role. But the flex, that's the cheese, the lettuce, the tomato, the onions, the relish. That's the thing that keeps it all together, maintains that structural integrity. You don't forget that taste, stays with you for a long time.
All by myself, I run a sub all by myself.